What's up, everybody? Just want to talk a little bit about Miami recruiting and a couple of points about the upcoming season for the Hurricanes. I'm going to combine them because I think both of these points will merge together. And this is what I mean by that. In today's world, recruiting specifically, prospects really look at what you're doing right now as a barometer of success, failure, what's going to happen in the future, rightly or wrongly. And we live in a right now society in general, so it's not just the teenagers here that I'm pointing a finger at. A lot of you are the same way, and I am to a certain degree as well. This right here is a big reason why. Phones, we do things a little bit differently. We're used to instant access, so for that, it is what it is. Now that I'm kind of off my soapbox about that, here's what I think. Miami has 16 commitments. Right now, they just got Derek Plaz. He committed a little bit before I did this video, and Derek's an offensive lineman from Jacksonville, Andrew Jackson High School. Again, 16 commitments. They're somewhere around number 10 in the country, give or take, whichever service you want to go with. I don't really put a lot of stock in that right now. There's too far to go anyway. But these are my predictions on what's coming up. They have a couple other kids that could make decisions this summer, but for the most part, it's pretty much over for this summer for the class of 24. There could be a couple others, we'll see. But we're getting ready to go into what I call flip season. June and July was commitment season. August can be a little bit, it's an unusual month, but September through October is flip season, and then we're back into deep traditional recruiting season again in November. A lot of kids take visits the last week of October through early December, official visits again to schools if they've got any left. But now, of course, the NCAA, it's unlimited visits, so it shouldn't be a big deal. Miami is going to do better, though, if they do a couple of things. Number one, they're after a lot of guys on offense that are receivers that are really good players. We know who they are. They're talked about constantly on All Hurricanes, where I'm a publisher on Fan Nation. I can tell you that kids like Joshisa Trader, Jeremiah Smith, Lawayne McCoy from Miami Central and such, all these kids want to see Miami's offense and see how they do. That's fine. That hasn't changed. I'm going to say that about 10 more times on podcasts and in articles, etc. It's just a reminder because it's just the bottom line. There is absolutely, unequivocally, and I know, once again, because of these, people are not very patient. There's no way to speed that up. There's just not. And to be honest with you, Miami's lucky in a way that there isn't, because these kids probably would have just completely closed the door on going to Miami, whether they committed somewhere else or not. Like Jeremiah's committed to Ohio State, Lawayne to Florida State, but they're both talking to the Hurricanes. So it's a long process, and it'll take care of itself. But these are the predictions, and I got a few things down here on why I think Miami's offense will do really well. Offensive line last year was a mess, especially with the injuries. I've heard that Zion is going to have a chance to be back this year as long as he continued and there were no unexpected setbacks. He could play offensive line this year, have a chance to even go to the NFL draft and do well. That's going to help. You can't win big in college football in any form of a quote-unquote pro-style offense without offensive tackles that are not just good but really good. 2, Maui Goa may be good enough to start at right tackle. They can move him around. I don't care where he really played this spring in the spring game, although he looked pretty good. That's going to help push the depth. Same thing with Samson Okunlola. Either one of those guys could start one or multiple games at either guard or tackle. When you have younger guys pushing the pile, that's going to help. It's going to help Van Dyke. It's going to help Ajay Allen. That's going to help Henry Parrish. We'll talk about those two here in just a second. But everything starts with the offensive line. If they're going to win games and actually throw the ball, that's going to be because they run the ball. Last year, when they wanted to run the ball against quality competition, and come hell or high water, Cristobal wants to be a power football team, you're not going to do that without quality O-line. And they can't have 3 guys out on the offensive line. I don't care who you have. That's not going to work either. But they do have more depth. I think the scoring will go up because Tyler is traditionally the kind of guy you look at and you say, well, this is a power throw it down the field guy. He's got accuracy, but if you give him a running game where he can be in play action situations a lot, he's going to put up big numbers. Now, 2 years ago in 21, he had a 6-game stretch where, off the top of my head, I believe it was 4 of the 6 were 400 yards and all of them were over 300 yards. North Carolina and teams like that they went up against, some of them were shootouts, difficult games, what have you. But he carried them in a lot of ways, and they had a little bit of a running game. But imagine what he can do in critical stretches, not so much totals because they had to play from behind more than they'd like. It actually would have been better if they had fewer stats because that means he was standing on the sidelines and they had a lead and that backup quarterback in there take a knee or something, or at least he was. They need to be in a situation where they can score earlier in games. And again, that's just predicated on the running game and being balanced. Shannon Dawson's offense will be about as balanced as it's going to get most of the time, unless they just see something that is going to be an obvious problem. If the team's missing their starting two corners, okay, you throw the ball more. But they're going to be a run-first team, and I think that's going to open up the passing game, and the yards per play in the passing game will be a stat that I bring up a lot this year, and that's going to help recruiting because guys like Jeremiah Smith aren't going to go somewhere, just to use him as one example, where they can't push the ball. He's a vertical threat. I've seen him, Lord only knows how many times, but he is elite at getting down the field. Well, nobody wants to be double covered because you can't run the ball and they know you're going to throw it. Miami has to win that. The points that I want to make about AJ and Henry are very important too. These are both slashers. They're not the biggest guys, but they're really athletic. AJ played at the Nebraska last year, and he was a really quality running back in a little bit of time that he was there before he ended up joining University of Miami. I think that both of them will be very critical parts of the passing game, even if it's just in helping move the chains, check downs, quick swings, plays that last year might have been 2nd and 10 will be now 2nd and 6, 2nd and 4, staying ahead of the chains. Those are parts of the game to also open up the passing game further, and that's a big deal. The other point I want to make, and this is just a prediction on Van Dyke, I've kind of went over this for a couple of months before I could really figure it out. This is just what I wrote down on my piece of paper here, what I project for him, and it's better because less is more. That's one of my favorite sayings in life and society, and in this case, I think it's really important. Tyler Van Dyke, final season projections, and I'm assuming he's going to play 12 games. I'm going to go with right at 3,000 yards, 25 touchdowns, 7 picks, 64%. Now, you're probably like, well, that's okay. That's not great. Well, actually, I'd rather he did that than if you added 500 yards and about 5 touchdowns. If you're like, well, what do you mean? That means Miami is in the lead in the second half. They're controlling the clock, and they're throwing when they want to throw the football instead of many of the games in 2021 when they had to throw the football. That is the difference between winning football games and losing. Teams that have quarterbacks that often end up leading the NFL in passing in some statistics, and there's all kinds. You look at the record, and they're one game above 500. Defense stinks, the running game stinks, maybe both, special teams, but whatever it is, they had to throw because they couldn't consistently establish the run, get ahead, be balanced, whatever it is. It's no different in college. There are some exceptions to that, and the pure just, I'm throwing it all over the lot air raid, kind of like Mississippi State did under Mike Leach. But outside of those, you need to be a little more balanced. And I think that this is my other little prediction, give or take, he will miss about a full game's worth of time by coach's decision because he is out of the game in the fourth quarter. I actually think that'll happen pretty much in Power 5 games because I think Miami will be that improved. But there's a side to that, too. I also think they'll go about 8-4, 9-3 because their schedule is just consistently going to have pitfalls, which is Power 5 football. Clemson and Florida State, Texas A&M. You're going to play teams like North Carolina, North Carolina State. None of those are easy games. You could lose any one of those, but they're probably going to win. It would not surprise me at all if they beat Clemson. If anybody watched Clemson last year, they weren't nearly as physical at the point of attack, even though they had some really good players up front and stuff. They got run over a few times in critical situations. Even in like the Notre Dame game, they got annihilated. Miami's going to test that. They're going to test it against A&M and all these different teams, but they've got a quarterback that can hit over the top too. So that is my prediction. Last thing for this podcast. It is going to be really interesting to see what Colbie Young, Xavier, Restrepo, and those guys do. Again, I'm thinking Van Dyke's going to have about 3,000 passing yards. I don't know if there will be anybody that will catch more balls than Restrepo. I have a hard time seeing that. I think like 70s, like bottom end for him. But he might only average about 10 yards a catch because he will be such a viable option on some of those little option routes underneath, short passes and slants. Colbie might be at like 60, 55 or something, but his average might be 15 plus. He's a big body dude. He's in great shape. And then finally, I'm not sure how the tight end situation is going to kind of alleviate itself. It's pretty young there, waiting on a couple of guys to get completely healthy, get locked in with the playbook because it's all new to everybody. There's a lot of questions there. That's my biggest concern on offense. It's not offensive line. I think they got enough talent there that'll kind of take care of itself. But if I'm right and they're at least above average at tight end, the 3,000 yards and the consistency and Van Dyke being able to come out of games because they're ahead will take care of itself. So please like this podcast. Please share it. Hit that notification bell. And above all else, for me, please make sure that you take the time to comment. If you've got something you want to say about Miami, or if you just want me to cover something about Miami, that's cool. Just let me know what it is. I'm more than happy to do it. So everybody have a great day, and thank you very much.